Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the video. We're going to be talking about all things Nvidia. We're going to start things out with Volta, which is naturally a successor to the current Pascal architecture, and it's had a rather radical redesign, which is said to make the chip a monster. That's what the quote is going around. We're then going to mosey on over to the GTX 1063GB, which is actually slightly different to the 6GB, and no, I don't just mean the amount of RAM that's sold onto the board. And then we're going to talk about the GTX 1050 to finish things off. Now, there is a lot of background noise, unfortunately, for this video. It's somewhat subsided, but I can't keep waiting. I've been waiting since early morning. It's now 6 PM, and I could keep waiting at this rate, so I just want to get this recorded at this point in time, at this juncture. So, anyway, let's get everyone onto the same page. If you're unfamiliar with Nvidia's current roadmap, which you might be if you're more console gamer or you're just getting into graphics technology, they are currently on Pascal, which is the GPU behind the GP100 series. So, for example, that would be the GTX 1070, the 1080s, the 1060s, the new Titan. You get the idea by now. It's built on TSMC's 16nm nanometer technology. Now, it is a successor to Maxwell, which itself was built on 28nm. Pascal is the successor to Maxwell, and Volta is the successor to Pascal. Right, everyone's on the same page. Now, the differences between Maxwell and Pascal are actually pretty subtle. Essentially, they did some tweaks, they did some changes, they improved the color compression of the GPU, they allowed the card to run at much higher clock speeds. Some of this is down to the 16nm process. And basically, the card is, I guess, and I don't mean this in a insulting way, but it's basically Maxwell 2.0. It's basically a improved, more efficient design, which is much better running at higher clocks, which is primarily how they managed to give most of the additional performance, as well as I said, improved changes here and there. Okay, so now everyone's onto the same page. Let's talk about the Volta news. So Volta is very different. A well-known leaker who has been posting on Beidou for some time, his name is USG Ishimura. Kudos to anyone in the comments who knows what that reference is. I won't say it. It's not particularly it's not a particularly difficult reference to get. And he has told us that there are multiple GV100 based cards coming, and they offer very, very, very strong performance. Now, SM, just as an acronym, is short for streaming multiprocessor. In short, for the purpose of this video, to simplify it, you just need to think of it as the building blocks of the GeForce architecture. You could think of it as little tiny processors inside the core. You can also think of it, if you're more familiar with AMD's architecture, which is possible if you've been studying, like, let's say, the Xbox news, the PS4 news. They are streaming processors inside that. They're basically interchangeably the same thing. Now, while Maxwell to Pascal are very similar, the previous generation of cards was not. Kepler to Maxwell was a radical redesign. They basically changed a lot of the back end of the card, the inner workings. So, according to these rumours, there will be the GV104, the GV110, and the GV102. Now, first of all, let's talk about the GV104. Also, you could think of this card as the GTX 1070 or 1080 based cores. So, just for example, with Pascal, GP104 services both the GTX 1070 and the 1080. The difference is you have a certain amount of the cores and inner workings of the card cut. If memory serves, ROPs, for example, remain the same. Memory controller remains untouched, but they have some of the cores disabled and a few other bits and pieces. Then you've got GV102. You could think of this as the Titan based card, which is the Titan X, which formerly used to be the same card that was for Maxwell, so now I guess you could informally call it the Titan XP, which that's not a very good naming convention, Nvidia. Anyway, and then finally there's the GV110. Now the GV110 is really interesting because the best way to have a point of comparison would be talk about the GK110. Now the GK110 actually was around back in the Titan Black, the 780, and it was also seen in the 780 Ti. It really was a high-performance computing-based GPU. It was primarily aimed at high double precision work. So what we have here is a bit of a question mark, because you could say, well, gee whiz, didn't I just say Titan? I mean, I just said Titan, and I just said the Ti, essentially, when I said the GV102. So what the hell is the GV110? Unfortunately, we do not know. It's possible, and this is speculation on some websites, including Fool.com, the Motley Fool, that we could see a pricing tier above $1,200. Not quite sure who is going to buy that. It's also possible that the GV, and this is speculation on my part, the GV110 has larger amounts of memory, it has more cores. It's possible it is primarily server focused, or it could be a little of everything. Unfortunately, we don't really know. And it's kind of interesting because theoretically we could see a GPU which is just so powerful, turning it on may well cause the world to explode. What we do know is Nvidia have clarified that they are finished, they're done with Pascal. Now, I don't mean that they're going to stop selling the card, I mean that they're finished with the designing phase. It's all done. So basically it's down to them now to release the cards according to their scheduling, which we'll talk about more about the 1060 and the 1050s in a moment. So the only thing Nvidia really have mentioned about Volta is that it would be mentioned present in the GTC presentation, which obviously will be happening next year, 2017. So what we can know from all of this information is going to be a radical redesign. It's going to offer an insane level of performance, and it's probable we're going to see even more variants of the card, which is going to make life very interesting for us as gamers. And it's also going to make life very interesting for AMD to counter. Speaking of countering, let's talk about the GTX 1060, shall we? So, I'm pretty sure most of you at this point are aware of the GTX 1060, the base model. Essentially, it is 1280 CUDA cores, clock speed of 1.7 GHz, and finally 6 GB of GDDR5. Well, what about the 1060 3 GB? Well, the good news is, first of all, it's going to be cheaper. You're looking at around $200 US. It's going to be launching supposedly pretty soon actually. It's going to be launching in September. Now, according to some images which have been captured from IT Home, the number of CUDA cores is going to be cut down to just 1152, and we're going to see the same boost clocks, but the memory, of course, is going to be cut down to just 3 GB. What this means is this card is really going to be aimed at competing against the RX 470, which is going to be faster. Unfortunately, I don't know. I know that's very unhelpful, but all we can do is wait. It's going to be quite an interesting card, however, to some folks. Now, my whole problem with these cards, and this is very off topic, I find it really difficult to recommend these GPUs. the cut down variants, because they're so close in price, especially when price gouging comes out for the first couple of months. They're so damn close to the bigger brothers, like an extra $50, but you could get the full-fledged GTX 1060 6GB, and yeah, okay, it's only got a few, you know, I'm sorry, brain just decided to just fall over there. It's only got around 130 additional CUDA cores, but A, that translates into a lot of performance, but B, the big thing is the memory. And because we don't really know what's going to happen to memory, as in the requirements for it in the future, it's possible that that extra 3GB, even at 1080p, could become incredibly useful. Now I want to talk about the GTX 1050. Unfortunately, we have slightly less information regarding the specifications of this card, but It Home have said that it will be retailing at around $150 US. Basically, this card is going to be aiming to compete, or should I say replace, the GTX 950. Now, we're unsure what the core is going to be, so is it going to be based on GM206, or is it going to be something entirely different? If it is GM206, is it going to have what? Fewer cores? How many fewer? I don't know. It could be 800 and odd, it could be 1,000 and odd. But realistically, what we do know is memory is going to be served by 128-bit interface, which is a lot smaller than the 192, which currently services both the 3 and 6GB models of the GTX 1060, well, 3GB, and the GTX 1060 6GB. So there's a lot of different options for folks in terms of the graphics card lineups, and honestly, it's going to be really difficult for folks to make a decision. And I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean that in terms of there are so many different options of cards, and so many of them very similarly priced. It's kind of a minefield. But hopefully you have enjoyed the video. I think that's just about it for this video. Well, if you've liked it, do the normal likey, subscribey thing. I'm going to get going, so take care of yourselves. Bye for now.